What if I told you that the very fabric of our modern world rests on the shoulders of jobs so obscure, most people have never even heard of them? Picture this. You wake up one morning to find no letters in your mailbox, no clocks on the wall, no streetlights guiding your way home after dark. Chaos, right? Yet for centuries, these everyday conveniences didn't exist until a handful of forgotten professions stepped in to fill the void. Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to uncover 30 ancient jobs so vital, their disappearance would send our society spiraling into disarray. These aren't just dusty old titles from history books, they're the unsung heroes who built the world as we know it. One brick, one scribbled word, one flickering flame at a time. Think about the last time you checked the hour on your phone or dropped a letter in the mail. Now imagine a time when telling time required tracking the sun's shadow across a sundial, or when sending a message meant hiring a runner to dash across miles of treacherous terrain. The truth is, we owe more to Antiquity's overlooked workers than we realize. Without the scribes who painstakingly copied texts by hand, knowledge might have vanished forever. Without the Lamplighters who braved the evening chill to illuminate city streets, urban life as we know it wouldn't exist. These roles weren't just jobs, they were the glue holding civilizations together, the quiet architects of progress whose work echoes through the ages. So why does this matter now? Because hidden in the shadows of history are lessons about resilience, ingenuity, and the unexpected ways small actions ripple across time. This isn't just a list of odd old professions, it's a mirror reflecting how fragile our modern systems really are. As we journey through these 30 lost trades, you'll start to notice their fingerprints everywhere, in the roads we drive on, the books we read, even the clean water flowing from your tap. By the end, you'll never look at the mundane comforts of daily life the same way again, ready to meet the forgotten workforce that shaped your world. Let's step into the past together and discover just how much we still depend on it today. Long before keyboards and cloud storage, the fate of entire civilizations rested in the hands of men crouched over clay tablets and papyrus scrolls, the scribes. Picture the bustling markets of ancient Mesopotamia around 3,500 years ago, where every trade agreement, tax record, and royal decree had to be etched by hand in delicate cuneiform. These weren't just clerks with quills, they were elite professionals, often trained from childhood in complex writing systems that took years to master. In a world where literacy was rarer than gold, scribes held immense power. They calculated harvest yields that fed cities, documented the laws that kept order, and preserved the myths that shaped cultures. Consider the Rosetta Stone, that famous slab that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs. Without scribes painstakingly carving the same text in 3 scripts, we might never have deciphered the secrets of the pharaohs. Or imagine the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving work of literature, passed down through generations of scribes who copied and recopied it by flickering lamplight. Every time you read a book, swipe through news on your phone, or even glance at a street sign, you're benefiting from their legacy. But here's what's truly astonishing. Scribes didn't just record history, they accelerated it. When Hammurabi's code was inscribed on that 8-foot basalt stele, it wasn't just a list of laws, it was the birth of standardized justice, possible only because scribes could replicate it across an empire. Their work created the first paper trails of commerce, turning barter into regulated trade. In many ways, they invented the concept of bureaucracy, the often maligned system that, love it or hate it, keeps our modern world running. From tax forms to court transcripts, the ghost of the scribe lives on in every spreadsheet and legal document today. yet their greatest contribution might be the most invisible. By preserving knowledge across generations, scribes broke humanity free from the trap of oral tradition, where stories change with each telling. They built the first bridges between eras, allowing ideas to travel further than any single lifetime. So next time you complain about filling out paperwork, spare a thought for the ancient scribes, the original keepers of civilization's flame, whose ink-stained fingers lit the way to the modern world. Now let's talk about a profession that proves necessity really is the mother of invention, or in this case, the mother of some very creative laundry techniques. Meet the fullers, the ancient world's answer to fabric softeners and dry cleaners. While their methods might make your nose wrinkle today, these textile experts were the unsung heroes who turned rough, scratchy wool into wearable, even luxurious cloth. Picture the streets of ancient Rome, where massive vats of stale urine, yes, urine bubbled in open-air workshops. Passers-by would pinch their noses, but this pungent ingredient was the secret to the fuller's craft. Ammonia in the urine acted as a natural bleaching agent, breaking down oils and dirt trapped in wool. Workers would stomp the fabric barefoot in these vats, kneading it like dough to loosen impurities. Then came the next step, fuller's earth, a special clay that absorbed grease and odors, leaving the cloth softer and brighter. It might sound crude, but this two-step process was revolutionary, transforming raw fleece into material comfortable enough for togas, tunics, and even military uniforms. The fullers' impact went far beyond clean clothes. Without their skills, trade networks would have crumbled. Imagine trying to sell scratchy, smelly wool across the Mediterranean. No one would want it. But thanks to fullers, textiles became one of Antiquity's most valuable commodities, fueling economies from Britain to Egypt. Their workshops were among the first industrial hubs, employing dozens of workers who specialized in washing, dyeing, and pressing fabrics. Some fullers even became wealthy enough to leave their mark on history, like the Roman businessman Lucius Verus, whose fullers' guild funded public baths and temples. Here's the twist: modern dry cleaners still use chemical processes eerily similar to those ancient techniques. Instead of urine, we use synthetic ammonia, and instead of clay, we have advanced detergents, but the core idea remains the same. Even the term dry cleaning traces back to fullers, who pioneered methods to clean fabrics without harsh scrubbing that could damage delicate fibers. So the next time you toss a stained shirt into the washing machine without a second thought, remember the fullers, the innovators who turned laundry from a chore into an industry, one questionable vat at a time. Their legacy isn't just about clean clothes, though. It's about how even the messiest, most unglamorous jobs can shape civilization. Without fullers, the ancient world wouldn't have had the textiles to clothe armies, keep citizens warm, or create the vibrant dyes that signaled status and power. They remind us that progress often starts in the most unexpected places, sometimes quite literally in a tub of something foul. Imagine walking through a city at night without a single streetlight, just darkness pressing in from every alleyway, every corner hiding potential danger. That was the reality before Lamplighters transformed urban life one flickering flame at a time. These unsung heroes didn't just carry torches, they carried the promise of safety, commerce, and community into the night. Long before the hum of electric bulbs, Lamplighters were the pulse of civilization after sunset, their rhythmic footsteps marking the transition from day to night as they moved from post to post with wick trimmers and ladders in hand. The job demanded precision and grit. Just before dusk, Lamplighters would patrol their assigned routes, scaling tall poles to ignite gas lamps with long matches. Each flame had to burn consistently, too dim, and the streets became hazards, too bright, and precious fuel wasted away. In London alone, thousands of lamps needed daily tending, with workers braving icy rain, howling winds, and the occasional angry bat disturbed from its roost. The best lamplighters could time their rounds to the minute, creating waves of light that rolled through neighborhoods like clockwork, but their impact went far beyond illumination. Think about the night markets of Paris, where vendors could suddenly sell goods past sundown thanks to the warm glow of gas lamps, or the theaters of Vienna, where performances no longer had to end at twilight. Lamplighters didn't just brighten streets, they extended the usable hours of cities, fueling everything from late-night philosophical debates in coffeehouses to the first shifts of round-the-clock factories. Even crime rates dropped in well-lit districts, proving light itself could be a social reformer. Here's what's fascinating: modern cities still follow the lamplighters' blueprint. Early gas lamps were placed at specific intervals about 30 yards apart, a distance calculated to create overlapping pools of light that eliminated dark gaps. That exact spacing still guides streetlight placement today, just with LED bulbs instead of flames, and those iconic spiral staircases inside Victorian lampposts. Designed for lamplighters to access the mantles quickly, a feature preserved in historic districts as a nod to their legacy. Yet perhaps their greatest lesson was in infrastructure's power to unite. A single lamplighter might service hundreds of homes, connecting strangers under shared light. In an age before social media, their work created physical networks of visibility, reminding communities they weren't alone in the dark. So next time you stroll down a brightly lit sidewalk or glance at a street lamp's steady glow, remember the lamplighters, the human candles who taught cities how to chase away the night. Before smartphones, before newspapers, even before the printing press, there was the town crier, humanity's first breaking news alert. Picture a figure in a bright cloak, bell ringing through the cobblestone streets, voice booming above the clamor of market stalls. Oyez, oyez, the ancient call to attention that meant vital news was coming. These weren't just messengers shouting into the void. They were the original influencers, their words carrying the weight of law, tradition, and community trust. In an age where most couldn't read, the town crier's voice was the thread stitching society together. The job required more than a loud set of lungs. A great crier had the memory of a scholar, often reciting lengthy proclamations word for word from the king or local magistrate. One mistake could mean spreading dangerous misinformation, like misreporting tax rates or misstating battle outcomes. Their voices had to cut through noise and weather, projecting across crowded squares without microphones or amplifiers. Some criers even underwent vocal training, learning to modulate tone for gravity or celebration. In 17th century England, crying the news was such serious business that harming a town crier carried the same penalty as attacking a judge, a testament to their role as living conduits of authority. But their real power lay in credibility. Unlike today's fragmented media landscape, criers were vetted and sworn to accuracy. Their announcements often ended with "God save the King." Not just as patriotism, but as a legal seal, a promise the information was true. People knew fake criers could be flogged or jailed, so when they spoke, communities listened. This trust let them perform miracles of communication, warning villages of approaching armies, announcing market prices to prevent trader exploitation, even sharing public health advice during plagues. In many ways, they were the first fact-checkers, their reputations serving as ancient blue checkmarks. The echoes of their work are everywhere now. Think of the town crier tone still used for important radio announcements, or how emergency alerts buzz on our phones with that same urgency. Even the phrase, "don't shoot the messenger," traces back to criers who occasionally bore the brunt of angry crowds hearing unpopular edicts. modern journalism inherited their dual role to inform and to hold power accountable, just with keyboards instead of bells. Yet something profound was lost when criers faded into history. Their presence created shared moments where entire towns stopped to listen together, fostering collective awareness in ways algorithms can't replicate. In a world drowning in information but starved for truth, perhaps we could use a little more of that old-fashioned, bell-ringing certainty, someone to step into the square and declare with unmistakable clarity what we all need to hear. Beneath the swirling symbols and cryptic manuscripts of medieval alchemy lay something far more valuable than the legendary philosopher's stone, the birth of modern science itself. While history remembers alchemists as eccentric figures hunched over bubbling flasks, chasing the impossible dream of turning lead into gold, their true legacy is written in the periodic table, the medicine cabinet, and even the smartphone in your pocket. These weren't just mystics in smoky laboratories, they were the original experimental scientists, blending observation, intuition, and relentless curiosity in ways that would reshape the world. Take something as simple as your morning pain reliever. The process of distillation, refining liquids through controlled heating and cooling, was perfected by alchemists like Maria the Jewess in ancient Alexandria. Her intricate glassware designs, called kerotakis and tribicos, became the ancestors of today's lab equipment, enabling the extraction of essential oils and medicinal compounds. Without these early breakthroughs, modern pharmaceuticals might still rely on guesswork rather than precise chemical formulations. Even the symbol for pharmacies worldwide, the bowl of Hygiene with its coiled serpent, traces back to alchemical emblems representing healing and transformation. But their genius extended far beyond medicine. When an alchemist in 8th century Damascus discovered how to produce sulfuric acid, dubbed oil of vitriol, it unlocked centuries of industrial progress. This caustic liquid became the workhorse of chemistry, used in everything from fertilizer production to metal refining. The same hands that scribbled celestial diagrams in leather-bound journals also pioneered alloys for stronger swords, glass for clearer lenses, and pigments that would illuminate Renaissance masterpieces. Consider Isaac Newton, who spent more time decoding alchemical texts than formulating laws of motion, convinced these ancient recipes held universal secrets. What's most surprising isn't their occasional missteps, but how often they got it right, using nothing but keen observation and trial-by-fire experimentation. The Chinese alchemists who accidentally invented gunpowder while searching for an elixir of life, the Persian scholars who developed aqua regia, the only acid capable of dissolving gold, centuries before modern chemistry explained why. Their laboratories were the first R&D departments, where mystical symbols served as coded lab notes protecting trade secrets. Perhaps their greatest gift was a mindset, the unshakable belief that nature's secrets could be uncovered through persistent experimentation. That ethos fuels every modern lab, from pharmaceutical giants to Silicon Valley startups. So next time you pop a vitamin supplement or admire a stainless steel skyscraper, remember the alchemists. Their quest for gold may have failed, but in chasing the impossible, they gave us something far more precious, the tools to transform reality itself. In the murky shallows of medieval Europe, where marsh grasses whispered and waterlogged boots sank into the mud, a peculiar kind of hunter stalked their prey, not with nets or spears, but with bare legs as bait. Meet the Leech Collectors, the unsung suppliers of one of history's most enduring medical tools. While the idea of wading into leech-infested waters might make your skin crawl today, these brave souls were the backbone of early medicine, providing the living scalpels that doctors relied on for centuries. The work was as grueling as it sounds. Collectors would trudge through waist-deep bogs, often wearing nothing but loose linen trousers to allow the blood-sucking creatures easy access to their skin. After standing perfectly still for what could feel like hours, they'd emerge with dozens of leeches clinging to their legs, each one carefully plucked off and stored in wooden containers filled with damp moss. The best hunting grounds were closely guarded secrets passed down through families like treasured recipes. Some collectors even trained horses to walk through marshes, knowing the animal's thick legs would attract leeches more efficiently than any human could. But why go to such lengths? Because in medieval medicine, leeches weren't just useful, they were indispensable. Physicians believed imbalances in bodily fluids caused disease, and bloodletting was the go-to cure for everything from fevers to melancholy. Leeches offered precision that crude lancets couldn't match, especially for delicate areas like gums or eyelids. Their saliva contained natural anticoagulants that kept blood flowing freely, making them perfect for surgeries where clotting was a death sentence. Even the placement matted leeches applied behind the ears were thought to cure headaches, while those on the lower back allegedly relieved kidney pain. Here's the twist: modern medicine still relies on leech therapy, just with far more science behind it. Microsurgeons use them to restore blood flow in reattached fingers and ears, as their anticoagulants prevent life-threatening blockages. The same properties medieval doctors exploited blindly are now harnessed in labs to develop blood-thinning medications. That humble marsh creature, once collected by peasants, is now a FDA-approved medical device, sterilized and shipped in sterile packages rather than moss-lined boxes. The Leech Collectors' legacy isn't just about medicine, it's about how even the most unglamorous jobs can drive progress. Without these muddy foragers, centuries of surgical experimentation might have stalled. They remind us that healing often begins in unexpected places, sometimes quite literally in the muck. So next time you see a medical symbol with a serpent or spot a leech in a nature documentary, remember the collectors who braved the wetlands. Their dirty work helped clean up humanity's understanding of the body, one blood-filled worm at a time. Before the piercing beep of digital alarms, before the gentle vibration of smartwatches, there was a far more personal wake-up call, the rhythmic tapping of a long stick against your bedroom window. Meet the knocker-up, an entire profession devoted to dragging sleeping workers into the industrial age, one dawn at a time. These human alarm clocks patrolled the foggy streets of 19th century England and Ireland, armed with nothing but a fishing pole, a pea shooter, or sometimes just a handful of gravel to rattle against glass panes. In a world where factory whistles waited for no one, their accuracy meant the difference between a day's wages and a locked gate. The job demanded near superhuman reliability. Knocker-ups rose hours before their clients, navigating pitch-black lanes with oil lamps to start their rounds precisely at the appointed times. Some used elaborate coded knocks, 3 rapid taps for the mill workers, 2 slow ones for the dockhands, while others memorized hundreds of schedules without written records. The best could estimate time by the stars or the first bird calls, long before affordable pocket watches existed. Miss a wake-up, and entire families might lose their livelihoods. One Manchester knocker-up famously compensated a client a week's wages after oversleeping cost him his job. But here's what's fascinating. This wasn't just about punctuality, it was about trust. Families would hand spare keys to their knocker-up, letting them enter homes to shake sleeping children for early shifts. In Glasgow, some knocker-ups doubled as neighborhood watchmen, reporting suspicious activity during their pre-dawn patrols. Their presence wove an informal safety net through industrial slums, where a missed wake-up could mean starvation. The system worked because knocker-ups were part of the community, not faceless corporations. They lived the same struggles as those they served. The echoes of their work linger in surprising ways. Modern scheduling apps still use the knocker-up's core principle, accountability. The vibration pattern on your phone, that's the digital descendant of the distinctive knock. Even the concept of a snooze function traces back to knocker-ups, who would often return 10 minutes later for an extra round of taps, for a small fee, of course. Their adaptability foreshadowed today's gig economy, with workers tailoring services to client needs, from gentle wakes for clerks to thunderous raps for deep-sleeping miners. Yet their disappearance reveals a deeper truth about progress. When cheap alarm clocks arrived, the profession vanished almost overnight, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. Knocker-ups proved society could innovate around any gap, even something as fundamental as marking time. They remind us that behind every obsolete job lies a story of human ingenuity, of communities finding solutions long before technology caught up. So next time your alarm jolts you awake, spare a thought for those shadowy figures with their long poles, who turned the simple act of waking up into an art form and helped build the modern world on schedule. Moonlight slithered across churchyard walls as shadowy figures moved between headstones, their shovels biting into earth with muffled thuds. These weren't ordinary thieves, they were resurrectionists, the controversial suppliers who bridged the gap between medical progress and societal taboo. In an era when dissecting human cadavers was both illegal and morally condemned, these nocturnal entrepreneurs kept anatomy tables stocked, often at the cost of their own reputations or necks. The work required macabre precision. Fresh graves were prioritized, bodies needed to be relatively intact for study, and the entire operation had to conclude before dawn. Teams worked in shifts, diggers to exhume, carriers to transport, and lookouts to whistle warnings of approaching night watchmen. Some resurrectionists even developed techniques to minimize disturbance, carefully replacing sod to hide their activities. The best earned grim nicknames like the Sack 'em Up Men for their efficiency in bundling cadavers into sacks or barrels for transport. Payment was per body, with premiums for unspoiled specimens, creating a black market where medical students might haggle over a corpse like produce at a stall. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Without these illicit deliveries, modern surgery would be decades behind. Before anesthesia, a skilled surgeon might amputate a limb in under 30 seconds, but speed meant nothing without understanding anatomy. Resurrectionists supplied cadavers, let pioneers like John Hunter map the human body in detail, discovering everything from blood vessel pathways to the lymphatic system. Edinburgh's medical school, a global leader in the 18th century, relied so heavily on exhumed bodies that local graveyards installed mort safes, iron cages bolted over coffins to deter thieves. The legacy is darker yet more vital than most realize. Public outrage over notorious cases like Burke and Hare, who murdered to supply bodies, eventually led to legal reforms, not fewer dissections. The Anatomy Act of 1832 allowed donated cadavers, transforming medicine from a shadow trade into regulated science. Today's organ donor programs and surgical training owe an unlikely debt to those who work the graveyard shift in every sense. Yet resurrectionists also hold up a mirror to progress's paradox. Their trade flourished because society wanted medical advancement without confronting its ethical cost, a tension still present in debates over genetic research or AI. They remind us that breakthroughs often emerge from uncomfortable compromises, and that even the most reviled roles can become catalysts for change. So the next time you see an anatomy illustration or benefit from a life-saving procedure, remember the moonlit figures who carried knowledge quite literally on their backs. Beneath the crunch of snow and the rasp of saw teeth, an entire industry thrived where most would see only frozen wasteland. Ice cutters braved sub-zero temperatures to carve up lakes like colossal cakes, harvesting winter's bounty to preserve summer's abundance. This wasn't just manual labor, it was the original cold chain logistics, turning ephemeral frost into a commodity that shaped diets, economies, and even empires. The process was a marvel of precision and brute force. Teams would clear snow from the lake's surface, then score the ice in grid patterns using horse-drawn plows. Men wielding 6-foot saws would follow, cutting blocks weighing up to 300 pounds each. Timing was everything. Ice harvested too thin would melt quickly, while overly thick slabs risked cracking under their own weight. The best cutters could read frozen water like pages in a book, judging quality by its clarity. Bubble-free, blue ice was premium grade, while cloudy patches signaled impurities. Blocks were then floated downstream to ice houses, where layers of sawdust insulated them through sweltering summers. What's astonishing isn't just the scale, but the reach. By the 1850s, New England ice cutters were shipping frozen cargo as far as Bombay, with insulated holds keeping butter from Denmark and Georgia peaches intact for months. Suddenly, perishables could travel beyond local markets, a revolution as disruptive in its day as container shipping would become a century later. The butter trade alone exploded from 3,000 to 34,000 tons annually thanks to ice cutters' efforts. Even hospitals relied on their harvests to preserve vaccines and cool feverish patients before mechanical refrigeration. Yet their greatest impact might be invisible, the birth of food safety standards. When ice-cooled railroad cars allowed meatpackers like Gustavus Swift to ship dressed beef instead of live cattle, it forced new hygiene practices to prevent spoilage. The same ice keeping oysters fresh in Chicago parlors also preserved milk for urban children, cutting infant mortality rates. Modern refrigerated trucks still follow routes pioneered by ice merchants, who mapped out depots where teams of horses could be swapped to maintain delivery speed. The irony, this global industry melted away almost overnight when artificial refrigeration emerged. But the infrastructure it created, warehouses designed for cold storage, transport networks for perishables, became the skeleton of today's grocery supply chains. So next time you grab a yogurt from the fridge or enjoy sushi miles from the coast, remember the ice cutters. Their frozen harvest didn't just chill drinks, it froze time itself, letting seasons and continents collapse together on a single plate. Imagine the stench clinging to your clothes, the weight of a wooden bucket in your blistered hands, the squelch of waste beneath your boots. This was the daily reality of the Gong farmer, medieval Europe's most reviled yet vital profession. Under cover of darkness, these sanitation pioneers descended into castle moats and town cesspits, armed with nothing but shovels, strong stomachs, and the desperate hope that the rotting wooden planks above their heads wouldn't collapse. Their work wasn't just unpleasant, it was the thin barrier between crowded cities and catastrophic disease. The job's name came from the Gong, an old English term for human waste, but the title barely hints at the dangers involved. Gong farmers worked exclusively at night due to the overpowering odors, navigating by flickering lantern light as they scooped excrement into barrels. Some pits hadn't been emptied in decades, requiring workers to wade through waist-deep sludge where methane pockets could ignite with a single spark. In London, the pay reflected the risk, up to 4 times a laborer's daily wage for this nocturnal ordeal. Yet even the generous compensation couldn't erase the social stigma. Many Gong farmers lived on society's fringes, forbidden from entering taverns or churches where their presence might offend delicate noses. But here's what history often overlooks: these maligned workers were early epidemiologists. When the Black Death ravaged Europe, towns with active Gong farmers frequently suffered fewer losses. Their grueling labor removed the breeding grounds for rats and fleas that carried plague bacteria. In York, records show cesspit maintenance contracts spiked after outbreaks, as panicked city councils finally recognized the connection between waste and disease. Some Gong farmers even developed primitive safety protocols, like soaking rags in vinegar to mask smells and possibly reduce infection, a crude but effective precursor to modern sanitation masks. The echoes of their work are buried in plain sight today, those circular manhole covers dotting city streets, direct descendants of medieval waste access points. The elaborate sewer systems beneath Paris and London, built along the same routes Gong farmers once used to transport waste to midden heaps outside town walls. Even the concept of municipal sanitation departments owes a debt to these nocturnal workers, who proved that public health requires systematic waste management rather than haphazard dumping. Perhaps their greatest legacy is the most invisible, the normalization of cleanliness. Before Gong farmers, waste was often simply tossed into streets or basement pits, creating a constant fog of filth. By establishing regular removal services, however crude, they helped shift cultural attitudes toward hygiene. The flush toilet might have been centuries away, but the idea that human waste required careful disposal took root in the most unlikely way, through the calloused hands of those willing to do the work others deemed beneath them. So the next time you turn on a faucet or walk past a storm drain, remember the Gong farmers. Their revolting labor laid the groundwork for the sterile, odor-free world we take for granted, one bucket of night soil at a time. At the edge of a freshly dug grave, with mourners holding their breath and candlelight flickering over a crust of bread placed on the deceased's chest, a solitary figure would step forward to perform one of history's most haunting rituals. Sin Eaters, as they were called, existed in the shadowy corners of funeral rites, particularly in Wales, Scotland, and parts of England, where grief and superstition intertwined. Their task was deceptively simple: to consume food, often bread or salt, that had symbolically absorbed the dead person's sins, freeing their soul to enter the afterlife unburdened. But the weight they carried wasn't just spiritual, it was social, psychological, and deeply human. What seems like primitive magic today reveals a profound understanding of emotional wounds. Picture a 16th century Welsh village where a farmer died suddenly, leaving unpaid debts and harsh words with neighbors. Without closure, resentment could fester for generations. Enter the Sin Eater, a living scapegoat who, for a few coins, would publicly devour the farmer's moral failings, allowing the community to mourn without lingering guilt. The ritual wasn't about theology, it was about creating psychological permission to move on. In an era before grief counseling, this act transformed abstract guilt into something tangible, something that could literally be chewed and swallowed. Parallels to modern therapy are startling. Contemporary grief counselors often speak of carrying a client's pain during sessions, creating a safe space to unload shame or regret. The Sin Eater's bread served the same purpose, a physical vessel for intangible burdens. Even the social isolation of Sin Eaters mirrors modern therapeutic boundaries. They were typically impoverished outsiders, living on village fringes to prevent contamination from the sins they absorbed. This distance paradoxically made them more effective. Like today's therapists, they could hold secrets without judgment because they stood apart from daily social circles. Yet their legacy is bittersweet. The last recorded Sin Eater, Richard Munslow of Shropshire, died in 1906, his grave marked with a plaque calling the practice a superstition. But look closer, the very fact that his community memorialized him hints at lingering respect. After all, societies still create figures to absorb collective guilt, from confessional priests to celebrities thrust into scandal. The Sin Eater's true lesson isn't about magic. It's about the universal need to externalize pain before healing can begin. So the next time you hear someone say, "I needed closure," remember those shadowy figures at gravesides. Their ritual might have vanished, but the human craving they addressed, to leave the past's weight behind, remains as urgent as ever. In a world brimming with new kinds of guilt and grief, perhaps we still seek our own versions of Sin Eaters, just with softer words and cleaner hands. The deafening roar of cannon fire shook the wooden decks as small, barefoot figures darted between towering guns, their arms cradling canvas cartridges of black powder. Powder monkeys, some as young as 7, were the unsung fuel of naval warfare, their tiny bodies weaving through smoke and splinters to keep fleets firing. While history glorifies admirals and ship designers, these children formed the living supply chains that made 18th century battles possible, paying for progress with their innocence and often their lives. Imagine the terror of a boy pressed into service, ripped from home ports with promises of adventure, only to face the reality of battle. Their average shift lasted 12 hours straight during engagements, hauling 50-pound powder kegs from magazine to gun deck in near total darkness. Any stray spark could mean instant incineration. The job demanded more than stamina. It required cat-like reflexes to dive for cover during broadsides, and the mental fortitude to ignore the screams of mangled sailors around them. Some ships tied ropes around powder monkeys' waists, not as safety lines but as retrieval tools if a child was blown apart. The rope helped gather remains quickly to prevent panic. Yet without them, naval tactics would have collapsed. A first-rate ship of the line like Nelson's HMS Victory required over 30 tons of gunpowder per battle, all moved manually through narrow hatches too small for adult crew. Powder monkeys' size and agility let them navigate these spaces at speeds that kept firing rates competitive, a critical edge when victory hinged on who could reload fastest. Their presence also freed trained gunners to focus on aiming rather than fetching supplies, effectively turning these children into living, breathing parts of the war machine. The cruel irony: many were orphans or workhouse boys, volunteered by parishes looking to cut costs, given no choice between the docks or starvation. Their pay, if any, went to ships' purses for maintenance fees, trapping them in debt bondage. Some captains kept them illiterate to prevent desertion, while others justified the danger by claiming it built character. The few who survived into adulthood bore physical and psychological scars, burst eardrums from constant cannon blasts, lung damage from inhaling saltpeter fumes, and nightmares that never faded. Modern parallels linger in unsettling ways. The same industrial logic that exploited powder monkeys' small hands for precise tasks, expendability in the name of efficiency, echoes in today's sweatshops and cobalt mines. Their story isn't just a relic, it's a cautionary tale about who pays the hidden costs of progress. Yet from this darkness came unexpected light. Outrage over powder monkeys helped spark early child labor reforms, proving even the most entrenched systems can change when humanity refuses to look away. So when you see a historic naval painting, look past the grand sails and heroic poses. Notice instead the small shadows darting below decks, the human sparks that ignited empires, forgotten by history but essential to its fire. The crack of leather against flesh echoed through palace corridors, but the cries came not from a prince, they came from another boy, one forced to kneel in his place. Meet the whipping boys, perhaps history's most peculiar solution to royal discipline. In European courts from the 15th to 18th centuries, these children lived in gilded cages with one grim purpose: to suffer whenever their high-born charges misbehaved. On the surface, it seems like pure cruelty, Yet this twisted system held a mirror to power itself, revealing how even monarchs understood the need for consequences, however warped their execution. Consider young Edward VI of England, whose whipping boy Barnaby Fitzpatrick became infamous for bearing the stripes of the prince's Latin grammar mistakes. The logic was chillingly practical. Since no tutor dared strike God's anointed heir, they punished a stand-in instead. But here's the paradox: these arrangements often forged intense bonds. Fitzpatrick wasn't just a human punching bag. He was Edward's constant companion, studying alongside him, sharing meals, even accompanying him to court. When the prince ascended the throne, Fitzpatrick was knighted and sent as ambassador to France, proof that their relationship transcended mere punishment. This duality captures the whipping boy's true role, less a victim than a living conscience, whose visible suffering was meant to shame the prince into better behavior. The practice's psychological underpinnings are eerily modern. Contemporary studies show children learn empathy by witnessing consequences, exactly what whipping boys were designed to demonstrate, albeit brutally. Royal tutors noted princes frequently improved after seeing their companions endure pain, suggesting the system occasionally worked by appealing to nascent compassion rather than fear. Some whipping boys even gained subtle influence, whispering advice during lessons or calming royal tempers before outbursts occurred. In a sense, they were proto-counselors navigating court politics with unique leverage, the power to make a future king feel guilty. Yet the darkest twist lies in the job's exclusivity. Whipping boys weren't plucked from peasant families but chosen from noble houses, their bloodlines just blue enough to justify proximity to royalty, yet not so prestigious as to refuse the role. Their status embodied feudalism's contradictions, privileged enough to dine off silver plates but disposable enough to wear the scars of another's misdeeds. The position vanished as Enlightenment ideals spread, replaced by tutors who dared correct princes directly, but its legacy lingers in how we still outsource accountability, whether to assistants taking blame for bosses' errors or public figures scapegoating subordinates. What's most revealing isn't that whipping boys existed, but why they became obsolete. Their decline signaled a radical idea, that leaders should bear consequences firsthand, not through proxies. Modern education echoes this shift, emphasizing personal responsibility over performative punishment. Yet next time you hear someone joke about taking one for the team, remember those long-ago boys who did exactly that. Their bruised backs a stark reminder that power unchecked by empathy is just tyranny in velvet gloves. In dimly lit cottages where the scent of herbs clung to the air, healers would reach not for a mortar and pestle, but for something far more unsettling, a live toad plucked from a damp wooden box. Toad doctors, as they were known across medieval Europe, practiced one of history's most peculiar branches of folk medicine, turning these warty amphibians into living poultices believed to suck poison from the body. Patients with everything from toothaches to tumors would press the creatures against their skin, convinced the toad's cold, clammy flesh could draw out fever or infection like a sponge. Superstitious, absolutely, but beneath the bizarre rituals lay a kernel of medical intuition that would echo through the centuries. The methods varied by region. Some healers preferred toading, placing the animal directly on a wound until it died, supposedly having absorbed the illness. Others dried toads in ovens, grinding them into powders said to cure epilepsy or ward off plague. In Wales, a toad sewn into a cloth amulet became a charm against scrofula, while German practitioners hung them in chimneys to prevent sickness from entering homes. What united these practices wasn't just faith in the toad's power, but a profound observation. Many amphibians secrete antimicrobial peptides through their skin. Modern research confirms some frog and toad species produce chemicals that fight bacteria and viruses, meaning these medieval healers weren't entirely wrong, just wildly premature in their application. Toad doctors occupied a strange middle ground between herbalists and alchemists. Unlike university-trained physicians who bled patients with leeches, they embraced a more holistic view, treating the body as interconnected with nature. Their remedies often combined toads with plants like vervain or yarrow, creating early examples of multimodal therapy, the idea that combining treatments could enhance their effects. This approach, though rooted in folklore, foreshadowed principles now central to integrative medicine, where acupuncture might accompany pharmaceuticals or meditation complements chemotherapy. The legacy lingers in unexpected places. Those sticky pads marketed as detox foot patches that turn dark overnight, a direct descendant of the toad doctor's belief that toxins could be pulled through the skin. Even the placebo effect, now recognized as a powerful healing tool, finds precedent in these rituals. Patients who truly believed in the toad's power sometimes experienced real relief, just as modern clinical trials control for expectation biases. Yet their story also serves as a cautionary tale about the line between observation and superstition. For every accidental discovery, like the potential medicinal properties of toad secretions, there were countless dangerous practices, like using toad venom as a heart stimulant, which could easily prove fatal. The decline of toad doctors came not from medicine rejecting their methods, but from the scientific method demanding proof they couldn't provide. What's most fascinating isn't that people once pressed toads to their boils, but why they stopped. It wasn't just better science, it was the realization that true healing requires more than symbolic gestures. Those warty little creatures, it turns out, were never the healers. The real magic was in the human desire to keep searching, testing, and refining one strange remedy at a time. The stench of the Thames at low tide could knock a grown man backward, a thick miasma of sewage, rotting wood, and the metallic tang of rusted nails. Yet every dawn, figures emerged from London's fog to crawl along its exposed banks, their fingers raking through the muck for treasures the river had stolen and discarded. These were the mudlarks, the ultimate recyclers of the industrial age, turning the city's waste stream into survival, one bent nail, one shattered bottle at a time. While the wealthy crossed bridges with perfumed handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, mudlarks saw opportunity in what others called filth, proving one person's trash has always been another's lifeline. Their toolkit was simplicity itself, a wooden rake for sifting, a sack for hauling, and calluses thick enough to handle broken glass without flinching. Children as young as 6 waded knee-deep in sludge, competing with rats for copper pins dropped by sailmakers or lumps of coal fallen from barges. The best spots were guarded fiercely. A stretch near Billingsgate might yield discarded oyster shells that could be ground into lime for mortar, while the docks at Wapping often coughed up scraps of rope that could be unraveled and re-sold as oakum for caulking ships. Some mudlarks specialized, like the toshers who ventured into sewer outfalls hunting for lost coins, or the coal whippers who waited below bridges to catch falling fuel with their bare hands. What's astonishing isn't just their grit, but their ecological foresight. Long before upcycling entered the lexicon, mudlarks were masters of circular economics. A single day's haul might include bones sold to glue makers, rags to paper mills, and even human hair to wig makers. Nothing was too degraded to find a second life. Their work kept usable materials flowing back into industry at a time when raw resources were scarce, effectively making them the unsung supply chain for London's workshops. When the Great Stink of 1858 forced the city to finally address its sewage crisis, It wasn't engineers who first documented the river's pollution. It was mudlarks whose daily logs of debris patterns helped map the worst contamination zones. Modern sustainability movements owe these scavengers an unacknowledged debt. The same ethos that drove mudlarks to repurpose every scrap now fuels zero-waste cafes and textile recycling startups. Even the Thames itself bears witness to their legacy. Contemporary, professional mudlarks with metal detectors still patrol the banks, not for survival but as citizen archaeologists, rescuing centuries-old buttons and clay pipes before the tide reclaims them. The difference: today's finds go to museums rather than pawnshops, yet the principle remains: what society discards tells its truest story. Perhaps the mudlark's greatest lesson is about perspective. Where others saw a filthy river, they saw a living catalogue of human industry, each fragment a clue to the city's hidden rhythms. In an era drowning in disposable culture, their ability to find value in the valueless feels less like a historical curiosity and more like a quiet revolution waiting to be rediscovered. The next time you toss a cracked dish or a worn-out shoe, remember the mudlarks, the original environmentalists who knew survival wasn't about having more but wasting less. Rows of women bent over wooden desks, their pencils scratching across reams of paper in perfect synchrony. This was NASA, a computer pool, in the 1940s, where human calculators plotted rocket trajectories with nothing but graph paper and slide rules. Before silicon chips or programming languages, the fate of space missions rested on the shoulders of these overlooked mathematicians, who turned complex equations into launch coordinates one painstaking digit at a time. Their work wasn't just number crunching, it was the foundation of modern computing, proving that even the most advanced technology begins with human ingenuity. Take Katherine Johnson, the physicist whose orbital calculations ensured John Glenn's historic spaceflight. When NASA new electronic computers spat out questionable results, Glenn famously demanded Johnson double-check the machine's work by hand. If she says they're good, then I'm ready to go. This moment captures the paradox of human computers. Their labor made automation possible, yet their skills remained irreplaceable even as machines arrived. Teams like Harvard's Pickering's Harem, a cringe-worthy name by today's standards, catalogued thousands of stars manually, creating celestial maps so precise they're still referenced in astronomy. The same women who computed artillery tables during World War II later calculated Apollo mission re-entry angles, their work bridging the gap between ballistics and spaceflight. What's often forgotten is how these rooms of human processors shaped the very design of digital computers. Early programmers modeled machine logic on the step-by-step workflows of human computing pools, breaking massive problems into smaller tasks, assigning specialized roles, and verifying results through repetition. The term computer bug itself comes from this era, when a moth trapped in Harvard's Mark II caused errors just like a tired human might. Even the concept of debugging mirrors the painstaking error checking these teams performed, reviewing each other's work line by line. Yet their legacy extends beyond mathematics. Human computers were among the first white-collar workers to challenge workplace segregation, with black mathematicians like Dorothy Vaughan mastering early programming languages to stay relevant as machines took over. Their quiet perseverance in the face of both technical and social barriers laid groundwork for today's tech diversity movements. When you hear about teaching machines to think, remember, those machines learned from generations of humans who turned calculation into an art form. Final punchline: we've come full circle. Modern AI systems now employ thousands of low-paid workers to label data, a digital echo of those rooms full of human computers. The tools have changed, but the truth remains. Behind every great leap in technology, there are always people doing the work we assume machines can handle alone. Nightfall in 18th century London didn't just bring darkness, it brought danger. Cobblestone streets turned into obstacle courses of open sewers and unseen thieves, where a wrong step could mean a broken ankle or an empty purse. That's where the Link Boys came in, their flickering torches cutting through the gloom like mobile beacons of safety. These weren't just kids with matches, they were the original ride-share algorithm, connecting stranded pedestrians with illuminated pathways for a penny a trip. In an era when even the wealthiest households might own only a single candle, these young guides became the human infrastructure that kept cities moving after sundown. The job required more than just holding a flame. Experienced Link Boys memorized the quickest routes between taverns, theaters, and wealthy estates, avoiding areas where gangs might rob their clients or them. Some specialized, like the boys who waited outside opera houses, offering express service to carriage stands for tips. Others worked fixed beats, patrolling between coffee shops and docks where merchants needed reliable light to inspect late shipments. The best could gauge a client's status by their shoes. Wealthy patrons got steady, elevated torchlight to show off their finery, while drunks received a wider beam to prevent stumbling. This wasn't just illumination, it was early customer service, tailored to the needs of a society learning to function around the clock. What's fascinating is how their work shaped urban design. The routes Link Boys frequented became the first streets prioritized for gas lighting in the 19th century, effectively turning their footpaths into permanent infrastructure. Even modern GPS follows their logic. When mapping apps suggest well-lit routes at night, they're digitally replicating the Link Boys' instinct for safe passage. The boys themselves evolved too. Some transitioned into Lamplighters when cities began installing permanent fixtures, proving adaptability has always been part of survival. Yet their legacy is bittersweet. Many Link Boys were orphans or workhouse children, paid just enough to sleep in stables or under bridges. The same torches that protected clients also burned their hands, and tales abound of boys being robbed or worse by those they guided. But from this hardship came unexpected progress. Public outrage over their conditions helped fuel early child labor reforms. The flickering light they carried didn't just reveal cobblestones, it illuminated societal gaps far darker than any unlit alley. Today, their spirit lives on in unexpected ways. Festival ushers with glow sticks, airport attendants guiding nighttime runway crossings, even the flashlight feature on your phone, all descendants of that original idea. Darkness is no match for human ingenuity. The Link Boys didn't just light streets, they proved that sometimes the most vital infrastructure isn't made of brick or steel, but of willing hands holding temporary flames until something better comes along. Fingers tracing the contours of a stranger's skull, eyes squinting to measure the bumps above their ears. This was the bizarre theater of phrenology, the 19th century's most controversial science. Phrenologists claimed the shape of your head revealed everything from criminal tendencies to musical talent, mapping the brain into 27 distinct organs responsible for traits like destructiveness or parental love. While their methods were laughably wrong, a murderer's skull might be labeled deficient in benevolence. Post-conviction, their core insight cracked open a paradigm shift. Perhaps behavior wasn't just shaped by souls or sins, but by the physical brain itself. Consider Franz Joseph Gall, the German anatomist whose obsession with classmates' head shapes launched the craze. His mistake was assuming skull contours mirrored brain development, but his breakthrough was insisting the mind had localized functions. This challenged centuries of belief that the brain worked as one indivisible mass. When phrenologists scanned the heads of poets and pickpockets alike, they were conducting primitive if deeply flawed comparative studies, laying groundwork for modern neuroimaging. Today's fMRI scans still echo phrenology's quest to pin personality to physiology, just with far more precision. The movement's cultural impact was staggering. Phrenology parlors sprang up like Victorian-era MRI clinics, offering readings that influenced everything from hiring decisions to marriage prospects. One London phrenologist even assessed children's skulls to recommend career paths, an eerie precursor to aptitude testing. Prisons adopted it to profile inmates, while educators used it to justify teaching methods for different brain types. The pseudoscience became a self-fulfilling prophecy. When people were told their skulls indicated aggression or kindness, they often unconsciously conformed to those labels, an early demonstration of the placebo effect in psychology. Yet their greatest contribution was accidental. By popularizing the idea that brains could be studied like other organs, phrenologists drew fresh talent into neuroscience. Young researchers like Paul Broca, who later discovered the brain's speech center, began their careers debunking phrenology, only to confirm that certain functions do localize in specific regions. Even the phrenologists' mistakes proved valuable. Their overzealous mapping of traits taught scientists what not to do, fostering more rigorous methods. The lesson here isn't just that science evolves, it's that progress often wears disguises. Like alchemists birthing chemistry or astrologers inspiring astronomy, phrenologists stumbled toward truths they couldn't fully grasp. Their legacy whispers a cautionary tale for our own era. Today's cutting-edge theories might someday seem just as quaint as measuring morality with calipers. But that's how knowledge grows, one imperfect idea nudging the next into place until the full picture comes into view. The cobblestone streets of Victorian London didn't just teem with people. They crawled with rats, a relentless tide of disease carrying vermin that threatened to overrun the city. Enter the rat catcher, armed with little more than a sturdy sack, a terrier, and nerves of steel. These weren't just pest controllers. They were the thin line between civilization and chaos, working in the shadows to keep outbreaks at bay and pantries intact. While their methods might make modern audiences shudder, think trained ferrets flushed into sewers or poisoned bait mixed with beer, their impact was undeniable. Without them, cities would have drowned in filth long before sanitation engineers arrived. Picture the rat catcher's daily grind. Pre-dawn, they'd patrol the waterfronts where ships unloaded grain, setting traps in the very spots dockworkers would later tread. Their dogs weren't pets but precision tools, bred to sniff out nests without disturbing the fragile peace of crowded tenements. Some specialized in rat pits, staging gruesome spectacles where terriers competed to kill the most rodents in minutes, a grim but effective way to cull thousands at once. Others turned ingenuity into art, like Jack Black, Queen Victoria's personal rat catcher, who dyed captured rats and sold them as rare species to wealthy collectors. The job demanded equal parts bravery and showmanship, a blend of exterminator and entertainer, keeping the streets safe one gruesome haul at a time. But here's what history often overlooks: rat catchers were early epidemiologists. Long before germ theory, they noticed plague outbreaks followed rat infestations near grain stores. Their handwritten logs tracking where catches were heaviest became crude disease maps, helping officials pinpoint infection risks. In Paris, municipal rat catchers even pioneered early, integrated pest management, alternating poison with natural predators like owls to prevent resistance. Their work didn't just protect food, it shaped urban planning, with warehouses designed for easier rodent proofing and sewers built with rat barriers after catchers reported migration patterns. The echoes of their craft are everywhere today. Modern pest control's emphasis on prevention over reaction, a direct inheritance from rat catchers who knew killing strays was futile without eliminating nests. Even the concept of zoonotic disease monitoring traces back to their observations linking rodent behavior to human illness and those heroic terriers. Their descendants now sniff out bedbugs in hotels and contraband in airports, proving some solutions transcend centuries, yet their legacy holds a warning. When rat catchers vanished, replaced by chemical pesticides in the 20th century, cities briefly celebrated, but the rats adapted while ecosystems suffered. It turns out those low-tech hunters understood balance better than we realized. In an age of superbugs and pesticide-resistant pests, perhaps we're just rediscovering what the rat catchers knew all along. True control means working with nature, not against it. Their dirty hands held wisdom we're still scraping from the muck. Morning in Victorian London brought a symphony of clattering hooves and creaking carriage wheels, and with them, an endless rain of horse manure. Imagine trying to navigate streets where over 50,000 horses deposited thousands of tons of waste weekly, turning every crossing into a treacherous sludge of filth. That's where the crossing sweepers came in, armed with nothing but a broom and a battered hat for collecting coins. These unsung sanitation warriors stood at busy intersections, sweeping paths through the muck so ladies in trailing skirts and gentlemen in polished boots could cross without ruin. Their work was invisible to the wealthy and humiliating to the poor, yet without them, city life would have ground to a halt under layers of dung. The best sweepers were equal parts traffic controller and performance artist. A skilled one could time their sweeps between carriages, darting into the road to clear fresh droppings before the next wave hit. Some developed signature styles, quick, efficient strokes for business districts, theatrical flourishes near theaters to charm tips from audiences. Children as young as 5 worked prime spots like outside railway stations, where the constant flow of travelers guaranteed pennies. Charles Dickens immortalized them in Bleak House with Joe, the illiterate sweeper, who knew it was hard to keep the mud off the crossing in dirty weather, a poignant nod to how these workers bore the brunt of urban growth. But their true impact went beyond clean shoes. Crossing sweepers were early indicators of environmental injustice. Wealthy neighborhoods hired private sweepers, while slums festered in waste, exposing the poor to higher disease rates. Their presence forced cities to confront pollution's unequal burden, a reckoning that eventually led to public sanitation reforms. The most successful sweepers even became minor celebrities, like Old Charlie of Holborn, whose cheerful demeanor and spotless crossing earned him a regular mention in newspapers. The irony, their downfall came from progress. As cars replaced horses, sweepers vanished, but their legacy lingers in today's street cleaners and crosswalk attendants. Modern cities still grapple with the same questions sweepers highlighted: who bears the dirtiest costs of urban life, and who's willing to do the work everyone relies on but no one sees. Next time you step onto a pristine crosswalk, remember the children who once swept the way, not with regulations or machines, but with battered brooms and desperate ingenuity. The chemical tang of mercury vapor hung thick in the dimly lit studio as the daguerreotypist adjusted the velvet-lined brace behind his client's head. "Hold perfectly still," he would murmur, knowing even a blink could turn the precious silver-coated plate into a ghostly blur. These pioneers of photography didn't just take pictures, they conjured light itself, trapping fleeting moments on polished metal through a dance of chemistry and patience. The daguerreotype process, unveiled in 1839, wasn't merely an invention, it was alchemy made real, transforming ordinary parlors into portals where time stood still. Consider the sheer labor behind each shimmering image. Before snapping a photo, the daguerreotypist had to polish a silver-plated copper sheet, to a mirror finish using buffing wheels and jeweler's rouge. Then, in a makeshift darkroom reeking of iodine crystals, they sensitized the plate by exposing it to halogen fumes until it turned golden yellow. Loading this delicate surface into a wooden camera box, they'd remove the lens cap and wait sometimes up to 15 agonizing minutes while their subject fought the urge to sneeze or shift. The exposed plate then underwent a toxic baptism, bathed in mercury vapor to develop the image, rinsed with cyanide solution to fix it, and finally sealed under glass to prevent tarnishing. One misstep, a stray fingerprint, uneven polishing, or overexposure meant starting anew. Yet these finicky creations birthed our visual age. When Louis Daguerre first displayed his plates in Paris, crowds marveled at their hyper-realistic details. The way lace collars showed individual threads, or how window reflections revealed buildings across the street. For the first time, ordinary people could preserve their likenesses without sitting for expensive oil portraits. The impact rippled far beyond vanity. Daguerreotypists documented gold rush towns in California, captured the ravages of the Civil War, and even recorded celestial events by pointing their cameras skyward. Matthew Brady's early daguerreotypes of Abraham Lincoln helped craft the president's public image, proving photography's power to shape perception. What's often overlooked is how these artisans laid the groundwork for modern imaging. Their struggles with exposure times led to faster lenses. Their chemical experiments paved the way for film development. Even today's digital sensors owe a debt to those silver plates. Both capture light as electrical charges, just with silicon replacing mercury vapor. The daguerreotypist's greatest innovation wasn't the image itself, but the relentless problem-solving that turned a novelty into a necessity. Their legacy flickers in unexpected corners. Instagram filters mimicking vintage tones, that's the warm sepia of aging daguerreotypes. The obsession with high-resolution smartphone cameras, an echo of those early clients gasping at eyelashes rendered in molecular detail. Yet something profound was lost when speed replaced craftsmanship. Where modern photos vanish into cloud storage by the thousands, each daguerreotype was a singular artifact, hand-rubbed, hand-developed, and often handed down as heirlooms. In an age drowning in disposable images, perhaps we're finally realizing what those mercury-stained artisans knew all along. True preservation isn't about capturing more, but cherishing what matters. The thunder of falling pins echoed through smoke-filled bowling alleys, followed by a blur of movement as nimble figures darted between lanes. These were the Pincetters' human cogs in the machinery of leisure, whose lightning-fast reflexes kept America's favorite pastime rolling long before machines took over. Perched on elevated platforms behind the pins, they performed a dangerous ballet, leaping down to stand up wooden soldiers, dodging stray balls hurtling back at them, and clearing deadwood with bare hands, all in the 30 seconds between rolls. Their calloused fingers told the story of a job that was equal parts sport and survival, where a single misstep could mean shattered knuckles or worse. What seems like simple manual labor was actually a masterclass in efficiency. Veteran Pincetters developed sixth senses for patterns. They could tell by the sound of a strike whether pins would ricochet toward their shins, or predict which pin boys, often teenagers working for nickels a game, would burn out first. The best worked in rhythmic teams, resetting lanes in perfect synchrony to keep games moving. Some alleys even held pinsetting competitions, where crews raced to clear and reset lanes blindfolded or with one hand tied behind their backs. This wasn't just busy work, it was a high-stakes performance where speed meant tips and hesitation meant jeers from impatient bowlers. The transition to automation reveals an ironic twist. Those very human skills, the quick hands and adaptive thinking, helped engineers design the first mechanical pincetters. Observing how workers swiftly stacked pins by hand inspired the spotting table mechanism still used today, where a carpeted elevator lifts and precisely places pins. Early machines even mimicked Pincetters' safety habits, like the deadwood sweepers that clear fallen pins, a direct copy of the broom-wielding kids who once dodged balls to keep lanes clear. The profession didn't so much disappear as transform, with many ex-Pincetters becoming machine mechanics who understood the dance between wood, rubber, and physics better than anyone. Yet something visceral was lost when the human element vanished. Bowlers used to chat with Pincetters, learning lane conditions from their observations or getting pep talks after gutter balls. The clatter of pins had a soundtrack: the whistles, jokes, and occasional yelps of pin boys avoiding disaster. Modern players might not miss the occasional drunken argument over whether a pin truly fell, but they'll never know the camaraderie of cheering on a 15-year-old who just reset 40 perfect games in a row on aching feet. Progress gave us consistency, but at the cost of those unpredictable, utterly human moments that turned a game into a shared story. The Pincetters' legacy rolls on in subtle ways. That satisfying reset button at your local alley, it's the ghost of a teenager's sweat, the automatic scoring system, born from arguments settled by pinboys who saw every roll up close. Even the pause between frames, once filled with scrambling footsteps, remains as a silent tribute to the hands that built bowling's rhythm long before machines could keep time. The roar of spring meltwater filled the valley as men in spiked boots danced across a churning carpet of logs, their long pike poles flashing in the sunlight. These were the log drivers, part lumberjack, part acrobat, who turned raging rivers into conveyor belts for the timber that built nations. Every nail-studded boot print left on those floating trunks told a story of balance and brute strength, of men who could read water like a map and muscle an entire forest downstream with nothing but skill and sheer audacity. The process was deceptively simple in theory, deadly in practice. After winter logging crews felled trees upstream, drivers would roll the logs in, launching them into swollen rivers where the current carried them toward distant mills. But nature never cooperated. Logs jammed around bends, piled up in rapids, or sank in deep pools. That's when drivers leapt into action, scrambling across the shifting, rolling logs to pry jams loose with their peavies. One misstep meant being crushed between tons of grinding timber or dragged under by the icy current. The best could sprint across floating logs like solid ground, sensing which would hold their weight and which would roll treacherously underfoot, a skill known as burling that later evolved into the sport of log rolling. These river pilots didn't just move wood, they shaped industries. Before railroads crisscrossed continents, rivers were the only way to transport massive timber loads. A single successful drive could deliver enough logs to build an entire town, fueling construction booms from the Canadian wilderness to the American frontier. The paper in your notebook likely originated with logs driven down the Penobscot or Ottawa rivers. Even early newspapers relied on drivers to supply pulpwood. Without them, information itself would have flowed slower. Yet their legacy runs deeper than infrastructure. Log drivers developed an intimate knowledge of watersheds that modern ecologists still reference. They noticed how certain rapids always jammed unless specific key logs were removed first, an early understanding of fluid dynamics. Their seasonal migration patterns, following the thaw from south to north, created the blueprint for modern logging operations. Even their slang entered the lexicon. Terms like hogger for a greedy worker or widowmaker for unstable logs still echo in workplaces today. The profession vanished when trucks and trains took over, but its spirit survives in unexpected ways. Those extreme sports where athletes ride standing on floating objects. Direct descendants of log drivers showing off between jams, the environmental movement's focus on river health, born partly from drivers' warnings about what happened when streams got too clogged with debris. Next time you cross a wooden bridge or turn a book's page, remember the dancing figures who once balanced on chaos, the men who made rivers work like railroads, one perilous step at a time. Deep in the coal mines of 19th century Wales, where darkness swallowed lantern light and the air hung thick with the scent of damp earth, a peculiar sound echoed through the tunnels: tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. This was the language of the knockers, miners who turned their pickaxes into early warning systems, listening for the hollow ring that signaled deadly gas pockets ahead. Before canaries or electronic sensors, these human instruments relied on vibration and intuition, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology is a trained ear and simple physics. The technique was born from brutal experience. After one too many explosions claimed entire crews, miners noticed that certain tunnel walls sounded different before gas leaks, drum-like where solid rock should return a dull thud. They developed coded taps. 2 quick strikes meant safe passage, while a rapid series warned of danger. Some knockers specialized in sounding the roof, using echoes to detect unstable ceilings likely to collapse. The best could distinguish between the tinny resonance of methane and the deeper tone of carbon dioxide, guiding their teams away from invisible death with nothing but acoustics. What's astonishing is how their methods foreshadowed modern safety science. Today's ultrasonic gas detectors work on the same principle, measuring how sound waves travel differently through hazardous versus clean air. Even the iconic canary in a coal mine, introduced later, was essentially a biological version of the knocker's pickaxe, reacting to gas before humans could sense it. The miners' low-tech genius didn't stop there. They also pioneered ventilation techniques like coursing the air, using controlled fires to create airflow, a risky but effective method that laid groundwork for modern mine circulation systems. Yet the knockers' true legacy lies in their understanding of interdependence. Mining was and remains a team sport where one person's vigilance saved dozens. Their tap codes evolved into complex communication systems, allowing silent coordination in pitch-black tunnels. This ethos of collective responsibility echoes in today's workplace safety protocols, where checklists and buddy systems prevent industrial accidents. The irony: we've come full circle. While digital sensors now monitor air quality, some mining schools still teach the knockers' methods as backup, proof that no algorithm can replace human perception honed by necessity. Next time your smoke alarm beeps or your carbon monoxide detector flashes, remember those shadowy figures in the coal seams, whose keen ears and rhythmic taps set the standard for listening to what the air itself tries to say. Moonlight cast eerie shadows over the churchyard as shovels bit into fresh earth with muffled thuds, not the work of grieving relatives, but resurrection men, the shadowy suppliers who kept anatomy tables stocked when legal cadavers ran dry. These nocturnal entrepreneurs operated in the grayest of moral territories, exhuming recently buried bodies under cover of darkness to sell to medical schools desperate for teaching specimens. While their methods skirted or outright shattered the law, their gruesome trade filled a vital gap in medical education at a time when studying the human body was both essential and severely restricted. The Resurrection Man's work required more than just a strong stomach. Teams often included lookouts, diggers, and transporters, each with specialized roles to minimize detection. Some developed techniques to disguise their activities, carefully replacing sod to make graves appear undisturbed or using wooden scoops to reduce telltale metal on stone sounds. The best could exhume a body in under 20 minutes, working swiftly to avoid night watchmen or grieving families who might post guards over loved ones' graves. Payment was per corpse, with premiums for fresh subjects, those buried recently enough to still be useful for dissection. Medical schools sometimes turned a blind eye to the origins of these cadavers, creating a thriving black market where the line between education and exploitation blurred beyond recognition. What's often overlooked is how these illicit activities forced long overdue legal reforms. Public outrage over notorious cases like the 1626 scandal in Edinburgh, where resurrection men were caught murdering to supply bodies, eventually led to regulated cadaver donations. The Anatomy Act of 1832, passed after years of pressure, allowed medical schools to use unclaimed bodies from workhouses and prisons, reducing reliance on grave robbers. In a twisted way, resurrection men didn't just supply cadavers. They exposed the hypocrisy of a system that demanded anatomical knowledge but refused to provide legal means to obtain it. Their legacy lingers in modern medicine's ethical framework. Today's body donation programs, with their emphasis on consent and transparency, exist partly because society recoiled at the alternative. Even the term resurrection man carries symbolic weight not just for the bodies they dug up, but for how their controversial role revived debates about science's moral boundaries. The next time you see an anatomical model in a doctor's office or benefit from a surgical breakthrough, remember those shadowy figures who, for better or worse, helped medicine confront its own uncomfortable necessities. Fog curled across the deck like a living thing, swallowing the bow of the ship whole as the lookout strained his eyes against the endless gray. Somewhere ahead, hidden in that impenetrable wall of mist, lurked the real terror of the North Atlantic, not storms or waves, but silent mountains of ice drifting unseen until collision was inevitable. This was the domain of the Iceberg lookout, a profession where sharp eyes and faster reflexes meant the difference between life and death for everyone aboard. Perched high in the crow's nest with only a peacoat against the biting cold, these human radars scanned the horizon for the faintest glint of white, their vigilance the sole defense against one of the ocean's oldest predators. The job demanded more than good vision. It required an almost supernatural ability to read the water. Experienced lookouts knew icebergs betrayed their presence long before they came into view. A sudden drop in temperature, an odd swell pattern, or even the way light refracting through mist could hint at danger ahead. The best developed a sixth sense, like the Titanic's Frederick Fleet, who spotted the fatal berg at 11:40 p.m. On April 14, 1912, his warning came just in time to swerve, but not enough. That near miss became legend, proving how a few seconds' delay could rewrite history. What's often forgotten is how lookouts worked as part of a larger sensory network. Before sonar or satellite imaging, ships relied on a chorus of human observations, the helmsman feeling changes in the wheel's resistance, the engineer noting subtle shifts in engine pitch as cold water density affected propulsion. Lookouts were the eyes of this system, calling down sightings to officers who triangulated risks using nothing but experience and intuition, their coded shouts ice ahead. Or growler to starboard, triggered instant reactions, with crews drilling for these moments like firefighters preparing for alarms. The echoes of their work linger in modern navigation. Today's radar systems still use visual confirmation from crew members during critical maneuvers, a nod to the lookout's irreplaceable judgment. Even the International Ice Patrol, established after the Titanic disaster, began with spotters in aircraft visually tracking bergs, just from higher altitudes. The most haunting legacy, those lookouts who saved ships never made headlines. Their success meant disasters that didn't happen. Yet their true lesson isn't about technology, it's about attention itself. In an age of automated alerts and GPS warnings, we've lost something fundamental: the art of sustained, focused watching. The next time your phone dings with a collision warning or your car brakes automatically, remember the men who stood freezing in the dark, proving that sometimes the most advanced system is a pair of eyes wide open and a mind trained to see what isn't there yet. The sharp staccato of Morse code filled dimly lit rooms as nimble fingers danced across brass keys, translating thoughts into dashes and dots that could cross oceans in minutes. Telegraph operators weren't just typists, they were the original network engineers, weaving an invisible web of copper wires and human intuition that shrank the world for the first time in history. Before logging on meant opening a laptop, it meant strapping on a headset and listening for the faint clicks of a signal traveling thousands of miles through a storm-lashed cable at the bottom of the Atlantic. Consider the sheer magic of what these operators achieved. A message tapped in London at breakfast could reach New York by lunch, unthinkable speed in an era when letters took weeks by ship. But the real marvel wasn't the technology, it was the people who mastered its quirks. Skilled operators recognized each other's fists, the unique rhythmic style of their key presses, like recognizing a friend's handwriting. They developed an ear for interference, distinguishing between a failing battery and a squirrel chewing through a rural line. Some could even send and receive simultaneously, a mental juggling act akin to patting your head while solving calculus. The social impact was revolutionary. When Abraham Lincoln's assassination was telegraphed across America in 1865, news traveled faster than a horse could gallop, uniting a nation in shared grief. Stock markets synchronized prices between cities for the first time, creating a truly national economy. Even romance flourished through wires. Operators on lonely outposts often courted each other in Morse code, their love letters bouncing between relay stations. The term cyber romance feels almost quaint when you realize Victorian-era telegraph clerks were the first to fall in love through a network, yet their most enduring legacy lies buried in our digital language. Morse code's efficiency, using short and long signals for common letters, directly inspired early computer binary systems, the handshake protocols modern networks used to establish connections. A direct descendant of telegraph operators' ritual exchanges of "ga, go ahead" and "sk, end of contact." Even today's emoji have roots in telegraphic shorthand. The original OMG might have been a hurried operator sending 88 for love and kisses. The final irony: as fiber optics replaced copper wires, we didn't abandon their craft, we upgraded it. Every time your phone pings with an instant message, you're hearing the ghostly echo of those long-gone operators, their clicks and clacks transformed into the silent pulses of light that now carry our words at the speed of thought. The internet didn't replace the telegraph, it fulfilled its promise. The sharp buzz of an incoming call cut through the humming office air as nimble fingers flew across a towering switchboard, plugging cables into jacks with the precision of a concert pianist. Switchboard operators didn't just connect calls, they were the living algorithms of early telecommunications, weaving conversations across cities with nothing but chords, intuition, and an encyclopedic knowledge of phone numbers. Before area codes or speed dial, these women, and they were almost exclusively women, held the entire social fabric of their communities in their hands, deciding who got through, who waited, and who needed a gentle reminder that their 3-minute call was up. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to manage a manual switchboard. Each operator memorized hundreds of names and numbers, recognizing regular callers by voice alone. They routed calls through labyrinthine networks of physical connections, troubleshooting when lines crossed or storms disrupted service. The best developed an almost psychic ability to anticipate needs, like the New York operator who connected a frantic father to the only pharmacy open during a blizzard, or the small town operators who knew to patch through emergency calls even when coins hadn't been deposited. Their switchboards weren't just tools, they were social hubs where gossip flowed as freely as electricity, and a skilled operator could tell which families were feuding by who refused to speak to whom. The technological constraints bred creativity. When direct long-distance dialing didn't exist, operators staged elaborate conference calls by manually linking multiple lines, a feat requiring perfect timing and steady hands. During World War I, they became unsung heroes of homeland security, monitoring calls for suspicious activity and alerting authorities to potential spies. Even the iconic "Hello Girls" of the Signal Corps served overseas, connecting battlefield communications under fire and proving that switchboards could be as vital as any weapon. Yet their most enduring legacy is invisible. The very concept of a dial tone originated from operators humming into lines to confirm connectivity, a practice standardized into the electronic tones we hear today. Modern call centers still use routing protocols modeled after manual switchboard practices, and that familiar "press 1 for sales" menu, a digital echo of operators asking, "What line, please?" Even the term switchboard survives in corporate jargon, describing anyone who manages information flow between departments. The real tragedy of automation wasn't lost jobs, it was lost human touch. Operators once softened bad news, mediated angry exchanges, and even provided companionship to lonely callers. When a 13-year-old Alexander Graham Bell first imagined the telephone, he sketched a device to help the deaf communicate. Operators became the heart that kept that compassionate vision alive. In an age of robotic menus and dropped Zoom calls, we've gained efficiency but sacrificed something deeper: the reassurance of a voice that knows not just your number, but your name. Every village square and tavern corner seemed to have one: the town drunkard, swaying slightly on his feet, eyes glazed but oddly observant. What modern audiences dismiss as mere alcoholism often concealed a far more complex social role in pre-industrial communities. These figures weren't just cautionary tales, they were living barometers of communal values, their very existence reinforcing unspoken rules through a delicate dance between ridicule and acceptance. Take the tradition of charity barrels outside English pubs, where regulars would leave unfinished drinks for the local drunkard, a practice that seems enabling until you recognize its deeper function. By concentrating excessive drinking in one visible figure, communities could monitor and contain behavior that might otherwise spread. The drunkard became a scapegoat of sorts, absorbing the village's collective indulgences so others could maintain respectability. His antics provided both entertainment and a tangible warning. This could be you if you strayed too far. The role extended beyond temperance lessons. Drunkards often served as informal peacekeepers during disputes. Their liminal status, part insider, part outcast, allowed them to voice uncomfortable truths others couldn't. A slurred comment about a farmer cheating at cards or a merchant watering down ale might carry more weight precisely because it came from someone with nothing to lose. In this way, they functioned like court jesters, speaking truth to power under the guise of intoxication. Some towns even institutionalized the figure. Records from colonial Massachusetts show certain drunkards receiving reduced sentences in exchange for performing public service, clearing snow or repairing fences while visibly hungover. Their labor served as a walking reminder of alcohol's consequences. Other communities used them as weather predictors, believing their aches could forecast rain better than almanacs. The paradox: as modern policing and social services emerged, the town drunkard didn't disappear, he became professionalized. The loudest drunk in the square evolved into the AA sponsor sharing hard-won wisdom. The village fool transformed into the addiction counselor applying evidence-based treatments. What was once managed through collective judgment became systematized, trading folk wisdom for clinical interventions. Yet something intangible was lost in this transition: the human texture of forgiveness woven into daily life. Contemporary rehab centers may be more effective, but they lack the messy humanity of a community that tolerated its black sheep while gently steering them toward better choices. The town drunkard's legacy isn't about romanticizing addiction. It's about remembering that societies function best when they make room for imperfection, using humor and humility rather than just handcuffs and prescriptions. Under the cloak of darkness, when respectable citizens had long retreated behind locked doors, the Nightsoil collectors emerged, shadowy figures pushing creaking carts through narrow alleys, their very presence a whispered secret of urban survival. These weren't mere laborers shoveling filth. They were the unsung guardians of public health, standing between civilization and the specter of disease that lurked in overflowing privies and reeking cesspits. While their work repelled polite society, it was as vital to city life as fresh water or sturdy walls, a fact made terrifyingly clear whenever their services were interrupted by strikes or shortages. Picture the nightly ritual. Collectors would lift heavy wooden privy lids, their nostrils assaulted by the eye-watering stench of accumulated waste. Using long-handled scoops or buckets, they'd transfer the night soil, a euphemism as delicate as the task was foul, into waiting carts lined with tarred canvas to prevent leakage. The most efficient teams worked like clockwork, timing their routes to avoid disturbing sleepers while ensuring no overflow could taint neighborhood wells. In Edo period Japan, collectors even paid households for the privilege of removal. Recycling the waste as premium fertilizer for rice pad is an early example of circular economy thinking that put modern sanitation systems to shame. What's often overlooked is how these maligned workers doubled as early epidemiologists. Long before germ theory, they noticed correlations between waste accumulation and disease outbreaks. In 18th century London, collectors serving affluent neighborhoods developed techniques like layering quicklime in cart beds to neutralize odors, unknowingly killing pathogens in the process. Their handwritten logs of which streets produced frothy stool or bloody waste became crude disease maps, helping officials track dysentery and cholera before doctors understood how they spread. When the Great Stink of 1858 paralyzed Parliament, it wasn't scientists but Nightsoil collectors who first testified about which neighborhoods' waste smelled sickly sweet, a telltale sign of typhoid contamination. The transition to modern sewers wasn't just about technology, it was a cultural reckoning. As flush toilets replaced chamber pots, municipalities struggled to retrain Nightsoil crews for sewer maintenance, their hard-won knowledge of waste flow patterns proving unexpectedly valuable. Some collectors became early drain inspectors, using their familiarity with neighborhood topography to map underground systems. The very tools of their trade evolved rather than vanished. Those tar-lined carts inspired the asphalt tankers that still clean septic systems today, while their practice of nocturnal work lives on in sewer repairs scheduled for minimal public disruption. Perhaps their greatest legacy is the most invisible. The Nightsoil collectors' daily grind forced societies to confront an uncomfortable truth that progress depends not just on brilliant inventors, but on those willing to do the work too foul for others to contemplate. Next time you flush without a second thought, remember the generations of shadowy figures who carried that burden literally on their backs, proving that sanitation isn't just about pipes and treatment plants, but about the dignity of those who keep them flowing. From scribes to switchboard operators, these lost professions remind us that every job, no matter how strange or forgotten, played a part in building the modern world. Their absence would leave gaps we can barely imagine: no clocks, no clean streets, no instant communication. Next time you flip a light switch or check your phone, remember the ancient workers who made it possible. If you enjoyed this journey through history, hit like, subscribe, and share which lost profession surprised you most in the comments. History isn't just about kings and battles, it's also about the everyday people who kept civilization running. Think about the scribes painstakingly copying texts by candlelight, their hands cramping as they preserved knowledge that might otherwise have vanished. Picture the Lamplighters trudging through icy streets, their flickering torches pushing back the darkness so commerce and culture could thrive after sunset. Consider the switchboard operators, fingers flying across tangled cords to connect voices across continents, human routers in a world not yet wired for sound. These weren't just jobs, they were the hidden scaffolding holding up progress, the quiet hands that turned the gears of history while kings and inventors took the credit. What's truly humbling is realizing how fragile our modern comforts really are. Remove just one of these forgotten roles from history's equation, and the ripple effects would be staggering. Without ice cutters, there'd be no way to preserve food before refrigeration, meaning no global trade in perishable goods. Without telegraph operators, news would still travel at the speed of horses, leaving continents isolated in ignorance. Even the reviled Gong farmers, waist deep in sewage, saved more lives than most doctors of their era by preventing cholera and typhoid outbreaks. Civilization isn't built on brilliant ideas alone. It's built on the backs of those willing to do the unglamorous work that turns ideas into reality. This isn't just about nostalgia for obsolete trades. It's a mirror held up to our own time, reminding us that today's ordinary jobs are tomorrow's historical curiosities. The barista crafting your latte, the warehouse worker packing your online orders, these roles are the modern equivalents of the knocker up or the mudlark, threads in a tapestry future generations will study with equal fascination. Progress doesn't erase the need for human ingenuity, it just reshapes it into new forms, so the next time you walk down a well-lit street or send a text message in seconds, take a moment to honor the ghosts of professions past. Their calloused hands and forgotten names built the world we take for granted, one stitch, one keystroke, one bucket of night soil at a time. History's greatest lesson might be this: no job is too small to change the world, and no worker is too ordinary to leave an extraordinary legacy.